So welcome to this discussion around the evolution of the consumer journey and what it means to brands, which is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Waze. The changes COVID-19 have wrought have been immense. There's absolutely no question about that. And rather than evolution, maybe a better description is revolution. So brands are having to adopt very, very fast as consumer changes become evident. And there seems little doubt that these changes we're seeing, there's a sort of certain permanence to them. I think when the COVID-19 crisis started, everyone felt it's maybe a temporary blip. But I think everyone now agrees that a lot of these huge changes in consumer behaviour are going to be permanent. So really what we want to talk to you today is actually look at the whole customer journey and, really literally the customer journey and really work out, what are the opportunities for brands and dealing with a world where consumers are now using private cars more. And obviously when they're in their cars, the places they want to go are also changing. So they're looking for new experiences. Trust is on the agenda. They want to be safe. So there's all these sort of special issues. So the purpose of the day is to really sort of try and understand what the challenges are and what the opportunities are in terms of overcoming them. And I'm pleased to say to do that, I am joined by an amazing panel, a real expert panel who are going to share all sorts of insights with you. And these panelists are Rue Roberts, the country manager of Waze, Vicky Fox, the chief planning officer of OMD, Steve Hewitt, head of retail at Capgemini, and Gracie Page, director of emerging technology at VMLY&R. Now, since we are talking about the customer journey, we're better placed to start, I suppose, than the moment people set off on the journey and climb into the car. So, Rue, there's a lot of talk at the moment about the fact that people are abandoning public transport. What's the evidence to support this? Is this really happening, or is this is this a sort of a bit of a rumour?
I think there's suitable evidence backing it up. We've been tracking a number of things over this period, and Waze data is suggesting that we are very much back to an excess of where we were before COVID started. That means more than 3.1 million users of Waze on the roads again in the UK, and increased numbers of kilometres driven. And what we're seeing is actually people spending longer in their cars, doing longer journeys on average than they did pre-COVID, which would imply trying to get more stuff done while they're out on the road and relying more on the car. The hypothesis is that the car is just simply seen as the next safe haven beyond the home, because you're in your own space, and that gives consumers a lot more confidence when they're going out on the road.
And obviously this is posing special challenges in terms of people and how people sort of get to these consumers who are now wrapped up in their little bubbles. So what sort of trends are you seeing there in terms of, I suppose the sort of the expression is digital out of home, isn't it? Where, if you can't get them through traditional out of home, they're in the cars. So what sort of opportunities, are we going to see for brands?
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of in a strange kind of way, Waze as a platform has taken on an additional sense of responsibility, where previously we were an option for advertisers to communicate to people at a particular point in their day when they're in their vehicles on the move, and targeting a specific action whilst they're on the go. I kind of feel like now there's this additional responsibility that we are a means of communication for companies that have had to pivot their consumer service or any of the kind of services that they have in store or a restaurant, whatever their business proposition might be. Because people are spending longer in their vehicles, actually that's quite a lot of time that advertisers otherwise can't communicate with people, and there's only a small number of ways in which you can do that. So we've kind of launched something called Location Personalities through this summer period, which is just a very simple way of communicating things like click and collect services, drive-through services. So depending on what your business is, there's a very clean and easily digestible way to kind of communicate that and attract people to your door. And we're finding actually that has helped bring footfall to our customers.
Yeah, and Vicky, I know you're seeing some sort of new trends as well in this area in terms of platform.
it's really important to keep close, and location services such as Waze are really important across the summer to understand people's behaviour, and then we overlay that with how people feel. So once you have those two things together, then that really gives you a rich picture of how we should behave as a brand and when we represent our brands. So we're very much seeing the same as Rue said, people are back to normal, in some cases more than normal, because they are avoiding public transport. There's limits to how many people can go on a bus. So you're having to make decisions. And I think when you get outside our media London bubble, that becomes even more apparent. People aren't so used to taking public transport to work because they're more used to driving to work. So those kind of things aren't as contrasting as maybe we see with the London Underground in our city centre here, but especially all around the country, we can see people are definitely taking advantage of that safety of being in the car more often for longer, and we absolutely agree that that's coming, especially when we go to Q4 where the weather's getting worse, so people are moving into sort of, you know, darker nights, rainy days, and even more use of the car. So we would see that trend too.
Yeah, and it's important to recognise that there can be the London bubble here as well. So the behaviours in the capital are very different to the behaviours outside. Do you think is that a fair point? Maybe Vicky, if you want to maybe have any views on that? Yeah,
I mean, we have to take data from across the UK, and that's absolutely what we do in all of our planning tools, because we do get a wrong perception of what's happening when if we're just looking at London is definitely not represented, and we have to be very sensitive to lockdowns in different regions as well, and be as close to understanding what's happening in each of those regions as we can, because for a lot of the brands we work with, the out-of-home market is really important to drive brand awareness, brand trust, and we need to stay close to our audience and what they're doing, and overlay that, as I said, with how they're feeling. So, and we have a weekly panel out in market which is nationally representative to ask people how they're feeling, what they're planning on doing, how they're going about their lives, and what's different this week to last week, so that we overlay the behaviour with how people are feeling to get a real insight into people's lives right now.
Yeah, and Grace, what sort of other changes are you seeing in terms of the behaviours around this sort of classic customer journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the crisis isn't necessarily creating new behaviours. It's definitely accelerating trends that we were already seeing. It's proving very much a catalyst for what a lot of brands actually already knew was coming. The need to create a more fluid, more connected customer experience that leverages a greater number of touch points that all circle around the user, with the user really at the heart. It's no longer about pulling a customer into a store location. It's about, using levers like social media and community management and the IoT, customer service, amazing packaging, all these different touch points to build an experience that gravitates around the consumer wherever she is. So in that sense, we're going on the move with our consumer and getting more into her life, as opposed to trying to pull her into ours. And that's definitely something that was already on the rise, and it's being accelerated by the current crisis. So, a lot of businesses that were looking to perform a digital transformation journey, perhaps over the next 3 to 5 years, are actually all of a sudden realizing that they need and want to make it happen over 3 to 6 months. So it's a very exciting time. There's a lot of opportunity for the creative industries to step up to that plate. And there's a lot of opportunity for those agile businesses out there who are ready to take on that challenge and ultimately blow the competition out the water doing it.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. I know, Steve, the reason I know your view on this, Steve, is because we spent a lot of time yesterday, because Capgemini is heading up a project in a building in London, which is called the Drum Labs. And what Steve is doing is putting a retail unit of the future in there, where he's sort of going to demonstrate all sorts of technology. So it's very interesting. But obviously, so that's why I know for a fact that you're also conscious of some really real changes in behaviour. And I don't know if you can maybe give us your insights as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Gracie that some of it is accelerations of things before, but there's also really a whole set of new anxieties and needs and even missions that I think a lot of customers are facing. And the real trick right now is spotting which one of those are going to leave lasting tracks in behavior and which ones, will go. But all of a sudden now, lots of our clients, find that customers don't want to handle products, and you're a brand whose business is all about that tactile, come in and experience a product, but now your customers don't want to touch a product because they've got new anxieties. That's creating a need to really rethink touchless experiences, and how do you make them experiences rather than these really sort of cold lab-like things. You have other anxieties that I think exist within cities but without cities around queues. One of the early impacts when shops started to open again was huge queues. I mean, I'm sure we all joined queues wrapping around car parks, and it's not much fun, and it's certainly not going to be fun in the winter. That was in summer. There's the cleanliness of the environment. Something that, maybe in restaurant used to be, it was and will always be a concern, but in fashion, in grocery stores, wasn't top of mind. Now it's top of mind. Product availability, the great loo roll shortage, probably soon to be revisited. These are things that we as consumers didn't maybe think about as much in our shopping experiences. And even to that point of, loads of us who commute into offices, we're not commuting, and we probably don't know where products are. So I think there's this resurgence in a need to discover actually where are products and services. And I think platforms like Waze again have a really important role to play there, when you're almost discovering the area that you live in because you're so used to grabbing products and services on your way to or from work. So I think there's a whole set of new needs and anxieties, and I think that's going to create a new set of missions for us as consumers that are great opportunities for people to harness.
I think on that point, if I may, Gordon, we're seeing sort of, if you think pre-COVID, but before the outbreak and before all the home working and the change in these kind of patterns, people would do their chores on their commute. And whether that was part of their public transport commute or part of their drive to and from work, it was harder to pick out exactly the behaviours and so on of individuals, other than where shopping habits were taking place. Now what we're seeing as well is distinct difference in journey types, because so many people are working from home or have changed their kind of commuter patterns. So it's a lot easier, like through Waze data and alternative data, to see this is very definitely a journey to a grocery store or a supermarket. This is very definitely a journey to the high street, independent of something else. Whereas before it was all kind of lumped into a commute often. So I think we're able to kind of see this shift in behaviour to local stores, change in choice, that brand strength or brand loyalty changing for price or proximity, and proximity becoming a much greater rationale in people's mindsets as well.
Yeah, it's interesting when you actually start getting to these conversations. There is a sense that actually, well, obviously the backdrop of COVID is awful, but it's also quite an exciting time as well. There's a sense that there's real new opportunities here. And Vicky, have you, I know you've been, you've seen sort of the, firsthand some contrasting strategies with some of your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've just touched on the different shopper behaviour, and so I work on the planning for Lidl, and it was an incredible time for them because you've got to remember, if we rewind, that their supermarket workers became frontline workers, which they their first duty is to maintain that safe environment for their staff, and also then the customers, and what they saw, and we, I don't know whether we're going to go back into this, but it was almost essentially Christmas shopping every day. Because of what Ruth said about you making less journeys, so that means the basket size increases. And for someone like Lidl, who prides itself on its super lean operational backdrop and logistics, to be able to maintain those prices, just having a slight tweak in shopping behaviour, let alone the dramatic one that we saw back in March, means that you get this obviously stock issues, and that meant queuing, which we definitely don't want to go back to. So I wonder, we've seen the dramatic shift away from that weekend shopping behaviour, which has been entrenched for decades. People go food shopping Friday Saturday, Sunday. That has flattened. It's starting to sort of, redress slightly, but I wonder if there's, with more people working from home, that there will be a more, permanence of that routine where people go, oh, do you know, it's a Monday morning, I'm just going to pop to the shops to get my weekly shopping. I think some of those trends will be permanent and some of them will change. But essentially, how we help them, we had to rebuild our planning curves based on data like Waze, based on our understanding of the market, and where out of home, would have reached X number of people. In February, we had to change that and say, actually, we had to pivot the strategy, pivot all of our campaigns to understand. So we had to rebuild response curves, reach curves, and optimize our media investment in a completely different way, and we're going to have to adjust. There is no normal set of curves anymore, so we are moving through a stage now. We are in a transition. We're calling them transition curves because they're changing, and we have to be really close to the market to keep making the best decisions for our clients.
Yeah, and obviously, Grace, you must be seeing similar trends.
Yeah, I don't think it's any massive surprise to anyone here or anyone watching that obviously consumers are spending an inordinate amount of time on their phones, their tablets, on social media. We've got stats like 53% of consumers are now more likely to shop online for any number of different types of items. And an interesting piece of research actually that came out from Facebook in April-May time showed that 45% of Facebook users actually had seen an uptick in buying themselves little treats, which qualified as items under £10. So there was an enormous sort of wave of people needing to just give themselves a little boost, and that came through buying small luxury items online. As a result of that, Facebook launched Instagram gift cards ahead of the product roadmap to be able to help people facilitate sending one another those little treats through social media, which has sort of kickstarted the rise of social commerce. But really, we've seen some amazing business model innovations as well, really brands just adapting at pace their own business models to the current situation. One that comes to mind is Patty and Bun in London, who turned their iconic burgers into at-home cooking kits. There's been a number of nail brands, nail beauty brands, who've come out with at-home gel manicure kits that they weren't planning on selling before. So, we're seeing brands win from a commercial perspective in the sense that they're growing their market share and they're buffering losses from closed retail locations. But they're doing something a lot more powerful, which is winning on an emotional level, because they're being there for consumers in this moment of crisis. And that's really what's going to scale and last, stay the course for them. Facebook research also showed, that 30% of consumers were trying new brands that they never would have considered before, because of their propensity to innovate during the crisis. So I think there's real gold in there for the brands that are bold enough to make some radical changes at pace to serve those consumers, and it won't be forgotten.
Yeah, it is another one of the positive stories of this era. It's just incredible amount of rapid innovation, isn't it? From the sort of small sort of pubs to sort of the big superstores. It's just incredible how they've managed to reorganize their businesses. And also how the marketing industry has also responded. But what other are you aware of other creative innovations? You might kick off again in this, Gracie, in terms of for instance, how people are using voice and.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the two kickers, actually no, three kickers, I would say, are voice user interfaces. Now, obviously, they've been on the rise for a number of years. This is not new technology. It got started in the 50s, actually. But there's now 100 million smart speakers in the US for 340 million populations. That's enormous penetration. And actually, the UK also has the highest penetration of voice-enabled devices in all of Europe. So that's something that consumers are really getting to grips with and using more and more. The uptick in daily usage of voice skills, predominantly on the Alexa platform, has been enormous in the UK during this period, simply because we are at home, so we have access to it. The other huge trend that we're seeing is this massive acceleration of the use of augmented reality, because it just allows us to interact with models of physical objects that we can't otherwise go and touch and feel, as Steve pointed out earlier. that is still very much a huge part of the retail experience. So augmented reality is enabling us to do things like put a piece of furniture in situ in our living room, imagine what a piece of art would look like on our walls, or maybe even actually try lipstick colors on. So this is something that, you know, because of its prevalence on social platforms as well, such as Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest, it's really replacing a lot of the physicality of the retail experience for the better. And then the third thing I also wanted to touch on was visual search, because it's basically freeing us of the need to describe what it is that we're looking for using keyword searches. You know, in a couple of years' time, that's going to be very much a thing of the past. And, you know, you've got amazing innovations from people like Snap Vision, who are working with Oracle to implement that at scale across hundreds and hundreds of retailers in this country. So you can search for the perfect dress, sofa, whatever that might be, from a simple photo that you might have found online. So these are some of the innovations that we're really seeing pick up the pace during the crisis.
I suppose there's also opportunity for apps to be quite playful. I really enjoy. There's a bit of Waze functionality where you can record your own sort of instructions. So if you haven't discovered it, I recommend it. I've been giving me hours of
I have not. Okay, that's my weekend gone.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. We've recently had the Batman and the Riddler voice prompts that you can have. There's some exciting ones to come in the UK as well. But the that functionality is fun. It's playful. Actually, some other kind of like fun and playful things. I've got a young family. I've got four young children that have kind of obviously had a very disrupted year with school and all the rest of it. Now just getting back into, you know, sports clubs and drama clubs and all the stuff that they really enjoy. But like I'm hoping, and I'm sure the rest of the country is exactly the same. I just want like a really nice, happy like run into Christmas, and it feels like the country needs Christmas to be as normal as it possibly can do. We've, you know, obviously this conversation's already commented on the retail aspect. And some of the things that we've been looking at is, you know, through a kind of a COVID period tracker. So we've been updating that on a timely fashion throughout this year with Ipsos, and the sentiment is absolutely clear that the retail habits are going to change. You know, 39% of consumers are deliberately looking for click and collect services or similar. So they're sort of relying on that ability to kind of get to and from stores, make their purchasing habits. They want to do it. But they want to do it in a confident manner, based on restrictions and everything that's been put in place. I was talking to somebody the other day. It's really interesting how, you know, it's been quite prevalent in the news at the moment around the cinema industry and how that's been massively disrupted with the change in release of sort of the big blockbuster movies. But the same is true for theatres. You know, the ability to go to theatres. Now, every year we go to the theatre to watch our local panto. It's like it's a big family day out in the run up to Christmas. And we've seen, I was talking to somebody the other day that they're launching a Horrible Histories like Christmas show, but it's like your car-based cinema, your drive-in cinema experience, to bring the traditional Christmas experience back, but again maintaining that kind of safety of your vehicle. So I'm kind of excited about some of the innovative ideas that are coming out in that way as well, that we can play, you know, that we can absolutely play a role in bringing customers to these experiences. So it's not just about purchasing habits, it's also about the social fun and inspiring things that families can get up to as well.
Yeah, and obviously it's a very sort of exciting, another really exciting dimension here is you're sort of seeing the digital and the physical realms really sort of converge, aren't we? Again, Vicky, you might want to kick us off on this.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Christmas is going to be the time when everything's going to be, we're going to check ourselves and see how well the retail space has evolved, you know, in a it's not even post-COVID, in a COVID world, how the retail environment is holding up. We know that Westfield London had its busiest day last Saturday since reopening in June. So there is still an incredible draw to go shopping, to experience, to see, to touch, but you know, in a safe environment as people can. And I saw some research from Clear Channel that said that, you know, whilst it is possible to make operate in an online world, they found that only 7% of consumers actually were going to make an exclusive online shopping purchase. So almost all of them, 86%, we're going to be doing a combination of online and real life purchase. So there is still very much a role for the high street and big retail environments to offer a very safe and secure way of experiencing Christmas gifting in a different way. But I think it's still important to bring that back, because that's very much part of Christmas. Part of the, it's not, doesn't happen on one day. Christmas is all of those events, like the pantomimes that you're talking about, all of those events and key moments that lead up to that, and making those choices and taking the kids Christmas shopping and choosing. And it won't feel the same if it was done behind a laptop, will it? So I think we see some semblance of normality in that, and I think that's really important for people to experience in the run-up.
Yeah, but very true. But what I find really interesting is how apps like maybe Waze, or maybe apps like the new Sainsbury's smart shopper device are beginning to sort of augment that physical experience. So on one hand, people are still traveling to destinations, but they're actually getting a much richer experience through apps. Have you any views on that, Steve?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because obviously there's been a big acceleration in that inevitable shift for more and more of us buying stuff online. But we partner at CAP with IMRG, and so from the stats we're seeing from online, we're still probably going to be at like 21-22% by the end of this year, which, looked at another way, still means like 70 odd +% is going to happen in stores. And I completely agree that there's just this experiential bit. Shopping isn't just about the function of shopping, it's about the experience of shopping for many people. And I think just generally, most of our clients recognize that, and their strategies are acknowledging that there is going to be a bit of shopping that becomes commoditized. And you're fighting the inevitable if you don't see how you can service that through digital. But there's a whole world of other opportunity in shopping that's about experience, and online alone is never going to solve that. And the more people have shifted online, the more I think it's starting to expose those cracks when you do shop across channels. And so, it is creating more need to do what the industry's been talking about for a long, long time. It started with multi-channel, then it was omni-channel. But the brutal truth is still most channels don't, provide seamless experiences for consumers across them. So I think, we're going to see a lot more focus on papering over that now and creating actual proper experiences. And we've seen some of our clients and our partners, almost see some opposite behavior, like people going into stores, experiencing it, but then going out of stores and digitally purchasing it, which I think, further almost underlines that point that actually you're going in for the experience. The purchase bit, you kind of, that's the commodity bit. You go do that. If you live in a city, you can probably get it delivered more conveniently, especially if you haven't got a car or if you've got a small car. So seeing some interesting, data points from our clients where actually people still want to go into store because they want that experience, and they're actually browsing in store and then ordering out of store, which is, perhaps not what you would have expected.
Yeah. So sort of looking, forward then, I suppose, there's 2 parts to this conversation. One is the sort of the journey itself, and then is what's going to happen at the destination. So these sort of trends continue. Have you any views, Roo? How the car and the car experience is going to look in maybe 10, 15 years time?
Crikey, 10 or 15 years. Prior to my time working at Waze, I was at Google for a long time, and oftentimes a device or a piece of technology just comes out and it takes everyone by surprise. So looking beyond 3 years ahead is always tricky. I think so much depends on so many factors if you look that far ahead, because you've got the increased pressure and shift to electric cars, for example. You've got continued pressure on the housing economy and building houses and community centres, and what does the makeup of the city look like over that sort of length of period of time, and therefore commuter networks and all the rest of it sort of take a different view. So I don't think I can look that far ahead, but what I can say is, automation is playing an increased role, and whether that's to do with self-driving cars and the development in that area. We've launched propositions like Waze's Carpool. It's not available in the UK yet, but it's running now in some of the other markets, and certainly the hope is to develop that. And that's all about reducing traffic. That's understanding where people are traveling to, and just combining people's journeys. So it's essentially a social platform. It's bringing people together, bringing communities together that are heading in the same direction, with this problem in mind of reducing traffic and helping people get from A to B in a more timely fashion, but on a platform that's bringing the relevant and right information to them about who they can share that ride with, what retail or other types of experience may be on their route. That's of value to them. So I think these kind of propositions are definitely going to build up. The ability to using technology to ease the journey is probably what we'll see develop further.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I find fascinating is that you can see in the not too distant future that cars are going to become the next major channel to consumers, for retail, for brands, for media. I drive a electric car myself, and it's got the first steps towards driving itself. And you've been in a Tesla and you've experienced it, or even frankly Heathrow's business car park a number of years ago, and you take the sort of self-driving vehicle to the terminal, and then you realize, I've got nothing to do. What's going to occupy me? And suddenly that's going to become a really important engagement channel to brands. And I don't believe it's that far off.
And I think ourselves, like Waze, but also like just navigation propositions on the whole, they play a greater importance there, because I agree with you that the more cars, the more vehicles that are on the road, the greater the need to ease traffic. There's the pollution issues with cars with their engines running that aren't moving. The build-up of that congestion is an issue. As I said, the pressure to kind of introduce more electric cars onto the road as a result of that. But therefore, we play a greater role. So actually, the navigation app, Waze, as an example of that, it's not just about getting from A to B in an area that you don't know the landscape. So somewhere you haven't been before, and you need the directions to get you there. Actually, there's a greater relevance to use these propositions all of the time to ease congestion. It might be, me taking my children to school, but actually on that route, on different days, there's alternative routes that will get me there in a simpler fashion. And this happens all the time, with road closures, traffic jams, like build up of congestion. The more cars on the road, the more relevance I think that our platform has to play.
So fascinating. And I suppose maybe I should put this question to Vicky and Gracie, because obviously now we've talked about the journey. But what about the destination itself? What do you think is the future of the high street?
Oh, that's a
You've got like 30 seconds to answer that.
That is a tough question. I think evolution. I mean, we were very much on a very clear journey to experiences before COVID, and you could just see a brand like IKEA that had put small stores on the high street. Planning stores, whereas and then you ordered offline, in a different environment. You definitely weren't going to go there to shop. You were going to go there to experience and to look and to build and to plan. So I think we were very much seeing that. I think that's we're in a COVID safe world, and I think that will carry on, and then you'll get this blended world. And I think in the reverse, for someone. One of the other brands I work on is McDonald's, and they are a stalwart of the high street, and it's important for them to evolve their business model as well. And we've seen it, unsurprisingly, McDelivery has fast forwarded its development plans, and the app and the platforms and the contactless ordering and all of those important parts of the business are just coming to the fore. And someone like, you have to be clear, someone like McDonald's is held to such a high esteem to do the right thing, right? Because they were the first to close, and they were the last to open in the category, because they wanted to make sure they did it right. And that's the kind of steps they have to take. And and when they pivot their business, and there's, you know, all of the logistics that go alongside with pivoting a huge business like McDonald's into you know, being able to offer delivery at scale, you've got to remember that people, like, they were tabloid photographers watching at McDonald's to make sure that the delivery drivers were maintaining social distancing. So you have to do this thing right now. We have to do it. You have to do the right thing at the right time. And then when, you know, as we move through this, the learnings will be incredible. And they, you know, they now have, you know, people on the app ordering, people are, you know, on the Uber Eats app, all the different apps ordering, and they have very successfully pivoted their business to delivery, which should be unheard of a few years ago, to think that you'd be ordering out at McDonald's.
And of course, you can also order on the Waze app. I have done that. Pizza.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So ordering ahead through Waze, or also paying through the Waze app. So fuel stations, for example, are partnering with us in some markets so that you can actually pay. So again, just alleviating that concern about going in or out of certain locations, and just seamlessly tapping into like loyalty programs and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Great, Gracie. Last word to you. What do you find what's the most exciting trend you're sort of seeing at the moment?
Well, we're seeing a lot of contactless technology innovations coming out from a sort of infrastructural hardware perspective for the high street. And these are things obviously that were in the pipeline primarily with Amazon pre-crisis, but they're releasing them like hotcakes at the moment. So, you know, in the last 6 months, we've had their Just Walk Out technology, which does what it says on the tin, you know, allows you to just take a product off a shelf and walk out of the store, and it will just charge it to your Amazon account, using lots of lovely data capturing biometrics that fundamentally make me on a personal level very uncomfortable. And I think there's huge concerns around what data is being harvested and how it's being used going forwards, that is part of a way bigger conversation. But they've also just released in the last week a product called Amazon One, which is effectively a palm scan to allow you to get in and out of buildings, authenticate, pay, you know, show that you're a member of a loyalty program, all these different things. So we're seeing these sort of hardware innovations that they're now shopping to high street retailers to innovate the high street experience and bring it into the digital realm.
That's great. Well, I think we've actually reached our destination. I have to say that, you know, that was a very enjoyable journey. Some great insights. All that really remains for me to do now is really thank our panel, Gracie, Vicky, Rue and Steve. So thanks for your time and all your insights. I really enjoyed speaking to you. I should say, actually, that if you're interested in learning a bit more about Waze, we are actually launching another film at the moment. Now, I'm going to be upfront with you and say this film was problematic for 2 reasons. First of all, we wanted to recreate an average commute into London, but we made this film just as commuting was outlawed back in March. So it didn't really work, so we delayed it slightly. And the second problem with the film was we decided to do that commute in a 1903 car to try and contrast the advanced Waze app with his old technology. And we were going to drive this 100-year-old car into London, you know, meet Domino's and, you know, have a day out trying to buy pizza in a 100-year-old car with Domino's. And that didn't work out too well either. But I hope you'll enjoy the film. It does give some fascinating insights. So if you want to learn about Waze, you can see that film as well. But anyway, that really is all for me. Thanks once again to our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.